An Eagle Named Freedom, My True Story of a Remarkable Friendship, by Jeff Guidry. Narrated by John Pruden. Copyright 2010 by Jeff Guidry. This unabridged audiobook is published by arrangement with William Morrow, an imprint of HarperCollins Publishers, and was produced in the year 2010 by Tantor Media Incorporated, which holds the copyright thereto. Introduction. The eagle was young, and she was badly injured. The bird was about 3 feet tall and probably weighed 8 pounds, though the long plumage of a young eagle made her appear bigger. Her feathers and her eyes were dark brown. It was August 12th, 1998. The eagle looked up at me, and my old life was over. A new, second life begun. I had been volunteering at the Wildlife Center for almost 2 years, and I'd helped with hurt eagles before, but this time was different. Freedom would become my friend and my teacher. With her, I would discover and deepen parts of myself. 2 years later, when I was diagnosed with stage 3 non-Hodgkins lymphoma, my third life began. But I'm getting ahead of myself. On the day she was brought in, 2 other people were working with the eagle. Good friends of mine, the director of Sarvey Wildlife Care Center, Kay Baxter, and Sarvey's most dedicated volunteer, Crazy Bob Jones. I couldn't tell by looking how badly the eagle was injured. Kay said, "Let's check her out." I picked up the eagle and held her as gently as I could. Kay carefully stretched out one wing, then the other. She ran her fingers along the bones of the wing. "They're both broken," she said. "Jeff, can you take her to the vet?" I looked at the eagle and said, "Yes." I was drawn to her more than any other wild creature I had seen. I didn't question why. Even now, after 11 years of a growing connection, sometimes the immediate power of my feelings for Freedom, as we came to call her, can seem weird to me. Feeling invested is a natural part of rescue and caring for wild ones, and I took Freedom's well-being personally right away. But there was an intensity that went beyond personal. On the drive to the vet, I could see pain and trust in her eyes. I hoped she could sense my caring as I spoke softly to her. Our conversations went beyond the words, and our unspoken connection was the beginning of the miracle that continues to unfold. A miracle of mutual healing, a miracle of deep friendship. The next phase of the miracle was a hard phase for me and those I love. In the spring of 2000, I was diagnosed with stage 3 non-Hodgkins lymphoma. There were 8 months of grueling chemotherapy. Freedom came to my rescue. As powerful as that time was, it didn't occur to me to write much about it. I wrote a few pieces for the Sarvey website, contributed to a few blogs, appeared on a radio show, and then on March 6th, 2008, I wrote the bones of our story in an email to my friend Gail, who works in wildlife activism. She had asked me about Freedom, and when I told her that there was a story to go with the pictures I had sent her, she said she'd love to see it. As I wrote her the story, I vividly remembered my first encounter with Freedom and how Freedom had been one of my most important allies during my battle with cancer. It felt good to share this information with a friend in the work, but I would never have expected the long-range consequences of that email. "Hey, Gail, here's the information you asked for about Freedom and me." When Freedom came in, she could not stand. Both wings were broken, her left wing in 4 places. She was emaciated and covered in lice. We here at the Sarvey Wildlife Care Center made the decision to give her a chance at life, so I took her to the vet's office. From then on, I was always around her. We had her in a huge dog carrier with the top off, and it was loaded up with shredded newspaper for her to lie in. I used to sit and talk to her, urging her to live, to fight, and she would lie there looking at me with those big brown eyes. We had to tube feed her for 4 to 6 weeks, and by then she still couldn't stand. Finally, the decision was made to euthanize her if she couldn't stand in a week. It looked like death was winning. She was going to be put down on a Friday, and I was supposed to come in on that Thursday afternoon. I didn't want to go to the center that Thursday because I couldn't bear the thought of her being euthanized. But I went anyway, and when I walked in, everyone was grinning from ear to ear. I went immediately back to her dowel cage. There she was, standing on her own, a big, beautiful eagle. She was ready to live. I was just about in tears by then. That was a very good day. We knew she could never fly, so the director asked me to glove train her. I got her used to the glove and then to Jess's. They're a kind of leather leash around each leg. And we started doing education programs for schools in Western Washington. We wound up in the newspapers, radio, believe it or not, and some TV. Miracle Pets even did a show about us. In the spring of 2000, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkins lymphoma. I had stage 3, which is not good. 1 major organ plus everywhere. So I wound up doing 8 months of chemo. Lost the hair, the whole bit. I missed a lot of work. When I felt good enough, I would go to Sarvey and take Freedom out for walks. She would also come to me in my dreams and help me fight the cancer, time and time again. Fast forward to November 2000, the day after Thanksgiving. I went in for my last checkup. I was told that if the cancer was not all gone after 8 rounds of chemo, then my last option was a stem cell transplant. Anyway, they did the tests, and I had to come back Monday for the results. I went in Monday, and I was told that all the cancer was gone. Yahoo! So the first thing I did was get up to Sarvey and take the big girl out for a walk. It was misty and cold. I went to her flight and jessed her up, and we went out front to the top of the hill. I hadn't said a word to Freedom, but somehow she knew. She looked at me and wrapped both her wings around me to where I could feel them pressing in on my back. I was engulfed in eagle wings, and she touched my nose with her beak and stared into my eyes. And we just stood there like that for I don't know how long. That was a magic moment. We've been soulmates ever since she came in. This is a very special bird. I never forget the honor I have of being so close to such a magnificent spirit as Freedom's. Hope you enjoy this. Gail told me she had been so moved by my email that she wanted to forward it along with pictures. I said, sure, and promptly forgot about the whole thing. The recipients of Gail's forward were moved too. They passed the story on. In a couple weeks, thousands of messages flooded my email inbox from all over the world. People wrote because they had cancer, because they loved wild creatures, and because they just wanted to be near the miracle. So many messages came in that I had to open up a new email account. I knew then that it was time to put the story of an eagle and a man saving each other's lives out to the world. I never would have believed until that day in 1998 that there was an eagle on her way to meet me. And I never would have imagined how deeply she would change my life. I'd be content if everyone who listens to this finds a little hope that miracles are real. Jeff Guidry. Chapter 1. One October day in 1992. I suddenly really saw an eagle for the first time. I was driving through the mountains when a huge shadow came over my car. I looked out and up. There was an eagle just ahead of me. It was flying so close to the car that I swear I could see every white feather in its tail, gleaming in the early morning sun. I was transfixed. After that first astonishing sighting, I began to see eagles everywhere in my new home in the Pacific Northwest. My partner, Linda, and I had moved to Eagle Country in 1989. I was fascinated by eagles and started reading about the birds and the beliefs of the native people who held them sacred. Pretty soon I was a walking eagle encyclopedia, so I was intrigued in 1992 when Linda told me she'd seen something about eagle watching on the news. The Eagle Watcher's mission is to educate the public about bald eagles. They also wanted to have the public view the birds in designated areas on the Skagit River, one of the largest gatherings of bald eagles in the lower 48 states where the birds follow the salmon to the Skagit feeding grounds. It was important to have designated areas because if people stop all along the 11-mile stretch of the river between Concrete and Marble Mount and disturb feeding eagles, they will leave the area, which is prime winter feeding habitat for them. Loving animals was something Linda and I had always shared. We'd both had many pets before we met. Our first cat, Baby Boy, had sauntered in when we lived in California, where I was a professional musician for years until I burned out on it. Baby Boy loved to greet and hang out with the band when we'd come to my house after playing around 3 a.m. He'd share our machaca burritos from the all-night Mexican food joint across the street, sitting on the couch with us just like one of the guys, getting some from each person. We thought about getting him a shirt that said, "It's okay, I'm with the band." Linda would come out in the morning to get ready for work and find one content Baby Boy soundly asleep on the couch. When he came into the kitchen for his breakfast, she'd tell him she knew he'd had a hard night. So, since we had always had a shared passion for our pets, eagle watching together was a natural for us. In December 1992, Linda and I stood in the rain and cold on the banks of the Skagit River, about an hour north of our home, to watch and listen to the eagles. The river was gray, the light only a little less gray. Linda and I were barely sheltered by a few magnificent cedars. A handful of tourists and Seattle locals stopped, stayed a minute or two, and left. Linda and I held our ground. For minutes at a time, I almost couldn't move. The sound of the river and the quality of the wet gray air seemed to transport me to another realm. The workaday world was gone. The sounds of modern life were gone. I could have been standing on the shore of the Skagit centuries ago, and despite the bone cold, I could have stood there for days. I knew that the Skagit had been designated a wild and scenic river by the federal government since 1978, and was therefore protected from any development or use that would keep it from being a free-flowing river. I had also learned a few of the First Nations beliefs about why it was considered sacred. But being still in that place made the magic come alive for me. We volunteered for the Eagle Watchers for 4 years. Then in autumn 1995, Melanie Graham, the river ranger, handed me a pamphlet for the Sarvey Wildlife Care Center and said, "Check this out, you might enjoy this." Linda and I met the director of Sarvey, Kay Baxter, at the Bald Eagle Festival in Concrete, Washington, a small-town festival held in the local high school gym in early February 1996. Linda and I had gone up together to meet her. Kay and the eagle Yakala were in the gymnasium along with many other exhibitors. Yakala was in a 6-by-6-foot chain-link enclosure. Kay had just lowered the sheet over his pen so they could both take a break. A man came up and started to lift the sheet to see. Kay whirled around and snapped, "Put the damn sheet down, stand back and show a little respect for the eagle." He dropped it and disappeared into the crowd. Without missing a beat, Kay turned back to us, smiling like nothing happened. She began to explain what Sarvey is and does. Cool, I thought. That's serious spunk. Kay was a diminutive woman in her mid-50s with wavy blonde hair. She was 5 feet 2 or 3 inches, weighed about 100 pounds, with the attitude of a warrior. I immediately liked her. We talked for a moment, and I told her about Melanie Graham, the Skagit River Ranger, sending me her way. Kay filled me in about Sarvey. She said the center was a non-profit wildlife care center whose goals are rescue, rehab, and release. In some cases, permanent injury or habituation to humans can make animals unsuitable for release. She told me what kind of wild ones they treated and spoke about a few of the permanent residents, like her red-tailed hawk and soulmate, Mellow Yellow, a Patagonian cougar named Sasha, and a barn owl named Mom. There was no formal orientation for new volunteers. Dr. Judy runs Thursdays, and she'll show you around, Kay assured me. Thursdays were great for me since I had that day off. I had no idea what I was walking into that first day I set foot on the muddy drive leading up to Sarvey Wildlife Care Center. It was a bleak and gray Thursday in late February 1996, a few weeks after the festival. I took the old winding country two-lane roads just at the edge of the foothills of the Cascade Range, down into the lush Stillaguamish Valley. The sky was a crackled gray, and the weather was one of my favorite kinds, cold and a little damp. The 35-minute drive gave me time to think. I wasn't totally sure that I wanted to get involved in wildlife rehab, but I knew that I owed it to myself to find out. I saw the Wildlife Center perched on top of a hill surrounded by giant cedars and firs. There were 2 ponds at the bottom of the hill. A mallard duck took off from the dark water. A dirt drive led the way uphill to the center. I felt excited and a little nervous as I parked and walked up the drive. There was a beautiful old schoolhouse to my right and some drab buildings straight ahead and on the left. I knocked on the front door of the schoolhouse. Kay opened it. With scarcely a word, she waved me toward a building directly behind me with huge deer antlers over the entrance. I knew enough about the Sarvey values to know that the antlers had not come from a hunter, but would have been collected from the forest floor after the deer had shed them. I opened the screen door and walked straight into a long kitchen in which 3 or 4 people were cutting up apples, bagging worms, and slicing meat on a long table. One of them, a bright-eyed, short-haired woman, looked up and said, "Hi, I'm Judy." Her grin put me at ease. I noticed right away that the group of volunteers was a mixed bag, that it crossed age, gender, and ethnic lines. I could sense dedication in their manner as they carefully prepared the food for their wildlife patients. Judy, or Dr. Judy as the volunteers called her, though she hated it, showed me around. We went into the back room, which was filled with aquariums, most of them empty. She said they wouldn't be empty for long. The first babies of spring would begin to arrive in March. "That's the beginning of baby season," Judy said. There was a big 4-by-4-foot cage with wooden bars on the opposite wall. "This is the dowel cage. It's for eagles," Judy said. "The wooden bars don't damage their feathers. And they're easier to catch in there." There were 6 big green cages stacked one on one, lined up along one wall, most of them occupied. "Those," Judy said, "are known, strangely enough, as the large greens. They're for raptors, medium-sized mammals like beavers, porcupines, fawns, opossums, and ducks and swans. They're all occupied at the moment, even though you can't see some of the creatures because we keep sheets hanging down in front of the doors. When the injured come in, this is a very frightening place for them. They're wild animals, hurt and in a strange place with people handling them. We try everything we can to keep these patients as calm as possible. The sheets block their visual field and help them feel safe." I looked in at a saw-whet owl and a raccoon. The big-eyed owl was beige and dark brown, and no more than 7 inches tall. It stared steadily at me. The raccoon turned its back on me. I imagined that in a few weeks I would be allowed to actually work with these creatures. I was wrong. Judy had a different idea. "Let's go get to work." She taught me how to clean the cages. Every cage was cleaned and sterilized every day, with fresh food, water, and bedding put in. There were no exceptions to this rule. I was pleased not to have to wait to try out the work. I started my cleaning with the small mammals aquariums. Judy pointed to an occupied aquarium on shelf. "We'll start with this guy," she said. "Grab one of those clean aquariums behind you," Judy said. "Put in food, water, and fresh bedding. The food and water are in the kitchen. The bedding is in the storage room." I followed orders. When the cleaned aquarium was all set up, Judy said, "Now you get to reach in and grab the flying squirrel in that aquarium on the shelf. Just reach in and get him." I'd already reached in and had him in my hand. Before I knew it, vicious tiny teeth had sunk into my finger. Blood flowed before I felt the pain. My finger looked as though a sewing machine had gone after it. I put the squirrel quickly and carefully in the clean aquarium and slapped the cover on it. Then I wiped a little blood on my jeans and got on with it. That day, I also helped with a great blue heron and went on a deer rescue with Megan, a longtime volunteer. We found the deer down in the woods behind the house of the woman who had called us. The doe was in bad shape, though we could see no obvious wounds or breaks. We loaded her into the truck and headed back to Sarvey. Megan was in back riding with the doe. About halfway to Sarvey, I could hear her tapping on the rear window. I pulled over. "She died," Megan said quietly. This is the real deal, I thought. Later that afternoon, Judy came to me and said, "Now let's go for one of the big gals." She led me to an eagle in a large green and demonstrated how to take a blanket, kneel down, and try for the angle that would work, preferably with the bird's back to you. Go in and cover the eagle and hold her down, all in one motion. Then take hold of both legs. You must have control of the legs or you are screwed, she warned me. You'll have to start all over, and that is no fun with an agitated eagle. Once you get the legs under control by gripping one leg in each hand, you move a wing under each arm. Then you have total control. These birds are incredibly strong and fast. Those talons are weapons that can inflict serious damage. Staff and volunteers have been sent to the hospital because of getting taloned. If you handle raptors on a regular basis, you will get nailed. It just happens. As we say here, if it doesn't bleed, it doesn't count. I'd already learned that with the squirrel, so I was ready. Judy stepped back and held the big bird while a young female volunteer efficiently cleaned the cage, lined the floor with newspapers, and set the cleaned perch back in. Then Judy set the bird gently back in the cage. Getting the blanket off an eagle is sometimes almost as hard as putting it on the bird, Judy said. I was impressed with how smoothly they worked. I was itching to try it for myself, but Judy said, "I want to take you through the process so you have it fixed in your mind and mental muscles." I waited. "Take a deep breath," she said. "Now visualize how it's going to go with you capturing the eagle. See the whole process in your mind. Get your breathing steady and mind focused. Then, when you're ready to make the catch, do not hesitate." We walked over to another large green with a ball in it. I stopped for a minute and let my breathing slow. Then I visualized the catch as it was supposed to go. Judy had said that if the capture didn't go as it should, I'd better have a backup plan. My adrenaline was flowing. I held my focus and swooped in with the blanket to make the capture. As soon as I had the eagle in my arms, I felt a rush I'd never felt before. I held the bird, and I swear I could have been holding a bear. All muscle, instinct, and power. I was pumped. Me and my first eagle. We finished the cleaning routine, and I put the eagle back in its cage. "You might be a natural," Judy said. "We might keep you." Just then, Kay appeared in the doorway and said, "Have you met Sasha the cougar?" "Not yet," I said eagerly. I was still high from my first eagle. "Go out back," she said. "I can't go with you because Sasha hates me. By the way," Kay added as I walked out the door, "she likes grass." I took a left and saw a spacious enclosure. A big, tawny cougar with a gorgeous tail walked toward me. She moved like silk. I strolled over, knelt down in front of her, and said, "Hi, Sasha. How are you?" She rubbed her face on the chain link, and I could hear her small motor going. So I reached in between the links and scratched her cheeks and chin. Sasha's fur was short, coarse, and thick. She had a distinct odor that was kind of sweet, like nothing I'd ever smelled before. Her motor got louder the more I scratched. Imagine your average house cat purring and amp it up 10 times, then make it deep and resonant. I picked handfuls of grass and fed them to Sasha a few blades at a time. She nibbled delicately at the grass. Watching her take the grass so gently from my hand, I studied her large incisors. I thought, damn, those are some impressive teeth. I was fascinated by her elegant power. Chapter 2. On my next visit a week later, Kay Baxter invited me into her home, the converted old schoolhouse at Sarvey, for coffee. I want to tell you how this all happened, she said. In 1980, when I was 40, I lived in Everett, Washington. A couple of the neighborhood kids found an injured saw-whet owl and brought it to me. I'd worked with Joni Butler at the Seattle Wild Bird Clinic, so I knew the basics of taking care of the little owl. Those kids, the owl and I, were the beginning of Sarvey. Soon, people began to hear about what I was doing and brought me other hurt raptors. The neighborhood kids continued to bring in baby opossums, raccoons, and squirrels. I had to find bigger quarters for the creatures. Kay told me that in 1987 she bought 5 acres just south of Arlington, Washington, at the top of a low-wooded slope, to give thousands of what she called our brothers and sisters, or the wild ones, a chance. The center had gotten its name in 1988 in memory of Kay's friend, Bill Sarvey, a Washington Department of Wildlife agent. I kept my promise to the wild ones, she said. Within a few weeks, I had decided to make my own promise to Sarvey's creatures. The clinic asks for 4 hours a week, and that was how I started, every Thursday. It was the new challenge I'd been looking for. I'd be making an immediate difference in the lives of wild ones, and the work would teach me things I'd never learn in books or on the internet. I would be part of work that mattered. Over my first months as a volunteer, I learned that Sarvey provided not just rescue, rehabilitation, and release, and shelter when release isn't possible for wild ones. The center also gave merciful death to those animals who were beyond help, and some raptors who couldn't be released become part of educational presentations. Kay's goal, and ours, was to keep the wild ones safe and reproducing, thereby helping to balance the ecology in our part of the Pacific Northwest, in Snohomish, King, Skagit, and Pierce counties. Kay told me more than once, with her customary passion, that as human development had taken over more and more of the area, mating, breeding, and hunting grounds for the wild ones had shrunk exponentially. I knew that habitat destruction was the eagle's greatest threat, and that we are their only natural predators. DDT, which causes the eagle's eggshells to soften, almost wiped out the bald eagle until the pesticide was banned in 1972. The only reason the species survived was because the mating pairs lived long enough to outlast the poison. Kay always said that more people was the problem, that as the human population had grown, the damage caused by vehicles, carelessness, and pure malice had escalated. As I continued to volunteer at Sarvey over the next few years, I learned more about Kay. She was more than the director of Sarvey. She was the fire, fuel, queen bee, and servant of the center. Sarvey was her life. I would learn from her, respect and love her, and fight fiercely with her. We were 2 strong-willed people with a passion for those who cannot speak out for themselves in human tongue. As Kay told me more about her initial motivation for wildlife rescue, I began to understand a deep aspect of her spirit. Her grandmother was Cherokee, and Kay carried with her a belief in native ways that she taught many of us. For example, the Northwest Native people regard the eagle as a messenger of peace, and many Northwest tribes scatter eagle down as a symbol of friendship and good intentions in front of guests at welcoming ceremonies. Kay had been diagnosed with breast cancer in the late 1970s. Out of all the women in her treatment group, she was the only survivor. The radiation treatments were brutally harsh. The doctors had administered the radiation from the front. It burned all the way through to her back and left black, peeling chunks.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?